Top Gun CEOs, managers, and executives are not unlike fighter pilots who fly 700 miles per hour and 100 feet off the ground on the way to a target in enemy territory. The fighter pilot is focused, prepared, indomitable, and determined to complete the mission, while every inch a professional who makes the complex seem routine. The combat pilot is never complacent. Radar-guided anti-aircraft artillery and surface-to-air missiles have a way of curtailing the romance of being a fighter pilot. Any enemy who would dare to acquire one of my fighters on radar would not long survive. Such contingencies are contemplated during the planning phase, while sophisticated onboard warning systems give pilots detailed indications when a threat approaches. On the following pages, I want to share with you 20 important principles I have learned and applied in my career that can guide you into becoming the best of the best and a top gun in the corporate, institutional, or government world. People can take away your money and your life. They can take your dignity and dream, but they can never take your integrity. That you must consciously and freely give. No promotion, nothing in life is worth your integrity. Guard it. As you struggle in your battle for supremacy, it is my hope that this book will provide you with some tools and weaponry to include in your arsenal. Keep your powder dry, and may God bless you. Be yourself. Too many upwardly mobile executives feel they need to be somebody else or act like somebody else. George Patton and Omar Bradley were distinguished generals, but outright opposite. Bradley was known as the soldier's general, while Patton was known as old blood and gut. Sometimes you have to do what works. Don't use a push when a nudge will work. Dress for success, but do you really need to go deeply into debt to buy that luxury SUV? When Sam Walton was the richest man in America, he drove an old Ford pickup. Billionaire and presidential candidate Ross Perot drove a 10-year-old Oldsmobile. While writing this book, I was listening to the Radio Factor with Bill O'Reilly in the background. O'Reilly is one of the most successful contemporary authors, as well as radio and television broadcast journalists of all time. He was talking about driving a 5-year-old vehicle. I once called the Adjutant General of Arkansas and was informed by his assistant that he was in a meeting with the governor. I told the assistant that I wanted to talk to the Adjutant General right now. They interrupted the meeting, and he took my call. "What's up?" he asked. I told him an F-4 had just crashed. I requested 2 helicopters. He said he would send them immediately and then asked what he should tell the press. The point is that too many people insulate themselves in meetings. Meetings are not the most important thing that goes on. The great economist John Kenneth Galbraith was a prolific author who taught at Harvard University for many years. He was one of very few 2-time recipients of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. John Kenneth Galbraith had this to say: "Meetings are indispensable when you don't want to do anything. Abolish all meetings that are not absolutely necessary. If you must hold meetings, have an agenda and don't invite people who are not absolutely essential to achieving the objective." I strongly believe in the concept of noblesse oblige. Nobility obligates. This is stated in the Holy Scriptures in another way. Jesus said, "For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required." The concept is generally used to imply that sense of condescending or hypocritical social responsibility. I prefer the more broadly applied use referring to those capable of simple acts, doing so for the benefit of others. On Christmas Day 1962, I was spending my first Christmas outside the United States at Wakkanai, Japan. I entered the dining hall and began to eat Christmas dinner, all alone. The dining hall was completely empty, except for the Japanese cooks and staff. I was feeling a little sorry for myself when a civilian walked in and asked if he could join me. It was Raymond William Stacy Burr. At that time, he was about halfway through his hit TV series Perry Mason, which won him 2 Emmy Awards. What started as my worst Christmas dinner quickly became my most memorable. The great actor was familiar with my hometown. He had fished many times in the Arkansas Ozarks. Raymond Burr could have spent Christmas anywhere he pleased. He unselfishly chose to spend it on the northern tip of Japan, with me. He was a real Hollywood star who dated Natalie Wood and starred in movies, TV, and radio. He was also a generous man. He donated his salary from the Perry Mason movies to charity. He once sponsored 27 foster children through the Christian Children's Fund. He would take the children with the greatest medical needs. This is what I mean by noblesse oblige. Accept responsibility. There are many that are willing to accept the pay, the power, the prestige, and the perks associated with top leadership. They love the travel and adventure. They cherish the 2 secretaries and the administrative assistant. There is just something about power. Josiah Charles Stamp was president of the Bank of England and the second richest man in Great Britain in the 1920s. He said, "It is easy to dodge our responsibilities, but we cannot dodge the consequences of dodging our responsibilities." Who's the fairest of them all? If you insist on getting credit for all the great ideas, over time you will have to produce all the great ideas yourself. On the other hand, if you don't care who gets the credit and are willing to give credit where credit is due, you will succeed. Leave public relations to public relations. Someone in your organization is responsible for public relations. Some call it media relations or public affairs, but it's all the same thing. Most likely that person is not you. People in public relations generally have something called a public relations degree and know how to do their jobs better than you. It is your responsibility, however, to keep them informed. Courage is as fundamental to good leadership as a scalpel is to a good surgeon. It took courage for Frederick W. Smith to start a company in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1971 called Federal Express. Courage should not be confused with fearlessness or being unafraid. Courage is the willingness to do your duty in spite of fear. Courage may not take the form of audacious heroism. Sometimes just making a decision takes courage. We have all dealt with indecisive people. That boss who must have reams of information only to find excuse after painful excuse to avoid making a critical decision. Churchill displayed a high degree of courage during the most tumultuous and dangerous period of world history. On the subject, he said, "Courage is rightly considered the foremost of the virtues, for upon it all others depend." This is a message to the author from an international businessman and banker who's also an Austrian prince. I was visiting a client in Colorado Springs, another former Air Force man such as yourself, and I noticed a copy of your book on the shelf. I mentioned that we use Six Sigma in our offices and branches. He highly recommended your book. Personally, I think you missed your calling and should have saved companies such as Kmart who needed your expertise. All companies live or die by the tactics and strategies used by management. I have read books by former Navy and Marine Corps officers who have made serious contributions to corporate management, but your book is by far the best in my humble opinion. Other comments received: I could not put the book down. It was like having a fireside chat with top management. I love this book and recommend it to anyone who is starting or running a company.